It's time to rock your midlife with Dr. Ellen Albertson. Are you ready to get real, break through, and learn how to make your midlife the best time of your life? Take on those life challenges and turn them into opportunities? Let's rock. Here's Dr. Ellen.
Hey everybody, Dr. Ellen here, the Midlife Whisperer. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited about today's show because we are going to be talking all about healing body, healing mind, healing spirit. And today's guests are going to share techniques to empower you to cultivate health, wellness, and longevity. And, I've been thinking a lot about healing. I've shared on this show that I was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. And so this week I'm kind of like, how do I rock my midlife when I've got breast cancer, and really thinking about that? And as I was taking my walk today, I kind of turned that around and I thought, well, how do I not rock my midlife? Because staying positive, rocking your midlife, if you are healing, which to me, healing isn't just about curing, getting rid of a dis-ease, but it's about becoming whole. For me, when I have a healing crisis, and this is my second healing crisis at midlife, I went blind about 4 years ago. I had retinal detachment in my right eye. And I thought, okay, universe is telling me to slow down, to pay attention and make some changes. But it's the same thing this time. It's kind of like, the first time maybe the healing crisis was wearing a pantsuit, and now it's wearing a wrap dress. I'm really doing everything I can to rock my midlife because my life is awesome. Just because I have breast cancer, it doesn't mean that I don't have amazing relationships. I love where I live. I love my career. I feel fantastic. So if you're going through some type of crisis, you are having, some kind of challenge, and let's face it, who is not at midlife, right? We've got relationship challenges, health challenges, that beautiful thing called menopause. We've got career challenges, financial challenges. This show is going to be all about finding that wholeness in that balance, particularly around, we're going to be focusing a lot on the physiological. And what I'm finding is that life is this giant classroom. If you take the perspective that you are a soul having a human experience, then it's like, okay, what the heck does my soul need to learn from what I'm experiencing? And looking at these obstacles, the challenges as really giant opportunities to notice what needs transforming. Like, what do you need to do to bring your life back into balance? And I think most of us as women go through menopause, and it's this tremendous opportunity to look at and say, well, maybe I have been giving more than receiving. Like, who does that, right? How many of us give more than receive? Maybe I need to slow down. Maybe I'm in a career that is really not in alignment with who I am, or relationship that I've outgrown. And it's this great opportunity, when we're hit with challenges, to say change and transform. And it's not always comfortable. It's definitely the caterpillar to butterfly thing, right? When the caterpillar changes into a butterfly, it's not like it just goes to the spa and it transforms as this beautiful creature. It literally digests itself. So the caterpillar first creates the chrysalis, which is like a shroud, and it excretes an enzymatic acidic goo, turns it into a goo that it digests itself. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're like, okay, what's not working in my life? Like, I'm looking at, I got to work on some of these workaholic tendencies that I have had for a long time, maybe slow down. There's some dietary tweaks, but it's a great opportunity to become that butterfly. For me, I'm looking at it as, a way of how can I live more deeply? How can we at midlife say, gosh, am I really enjoying my life as much as I could or as I'd like to? How do I slow down and enjoy my life more and savor more of my life? And the thing that I'm realizing is that it's not these Herculean shifts. I've been a health and wellness coach for 15 years. And when people come to me about changing their lifestyle, they're like, oh my God, this is so much work. I've got to do an overhaul. But there's these like beautiful changes you can make. Things like focus on you instead of taking care of everybody else. Tell your kids to make their own damn dinner, clean their own room, right? Maybe the floor doesn't get vacuumed and mopped every week. You let some things go. So focusing on yourself and what you need. I'm finding turning off the news is huge. We have this, if it bleeds, it leads news cycle. And I'm glad that we have so many podcasts that are nourishing, but listen to a podcast that nourishes you. Listen to nothing at all, or some music, or read a book, but do less of those things that drain you, like listening to news, which can be so distressing. Make time to relax and do more of those things that bring you joy. I'm spending a lot of time barefoot outside, doing gardening, going bird watching, reading a book, playing my ukulele, playing with my art supplies. I think midlife, we can like, where am I playing in my life? We can really reevaluate and like discover that inner child. And keep a wish list. That's something I'm finding powerful. When you get this sort of download of, oh yeah, I want to do that thing. I want to volunteer or try that recipe or travel somewhere. How are you expanding your horizon? So those are just little things you can do that make a huge difference. Also, if you are going through something, just realize, shit happens. This is common humanity, which is the second element of self-compassion, where people get sick. It's just part of life. And I know I had to sort of digest this. Gosh, did I fail my body? And, I do almost everything I think I can to stay healthy, and kind of like, okay, this is just common humanity. It's the luck of the draw. And, maybe there is a larger purpose to this, but just knowing that if something goes wrong, this is normal. It's not that it's just you, but when you realize this element of common humanity, that we all fail, we all get sick, we make mistakes, it's part of the human condition, then you don't feel so alone and you don't feel like you have to ruminate on it. And I guess the one other thing that I'm really realizing through this diagnosis is I'm edging God out. I'm letting my ego go a lot, as Wayne Dyer talks about this EGO standing for edging God out. And when you have a healing crisis, it definitely opens up that spiritual channel. You open up your heart, you cry more, you like analyze what's going on, you ask for God's support, you ask for prayer help, energy work, all of those things. And it's really, I'm finding out of my 7 steps in my book, I'm feeling more authentic. I am really amplifying my self-love. I'm really working on bringing my health to another level, feeling very empowered about making my own medical decisions. And I'm also just feeling just definitely closer to spirit and connecting with that more. So those are some ideas about healing. I would love to know what you're going through. If you have an idea for the show or suggestions, reach out to themidlifewhisperer.com. That's themidlifewhisperer.com, or just hit me up with a comment in a box on your favorite podcast platform. I'd love to know what you think about the show. So I'm excited to bring on our first guest, who is an expert in terms of healing, both menopause and breast cancer. She is Junie Boucher. She is a nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified Unplugged Meditation teacher, which I absolutely love. Can't wait to hear more about that. She was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease at 15 and then breast cancer at 41. And she has seen incredible changes to her health, her stress levels, and her overall joy as a result of nutrient-dense meals, a consistent meditation practice, and a whole lot of self-love. And her practice focuses on breast cancer survivorship and the management of perimenopause and menopausal symptoms through whole food nutrition and stress management. And she also has a podcast, which is awesome. It's called The Tata Cancer, which focuses on healing after breast cancer diagnosis. Junie, welcome to Rock Your Midlife.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
And where are you? I forgot to ask you that off air. Where in the world are you?
I am in Los Angeles right now. I'm actually going to be moving to Portland, but currently in Los Angeles. I'm a California girl.
Oh, nice. And Portland is a lovely city. I'm on the other coast in Vermont. So
Yeah.
Before we sort of get into how we can heal ourselves through menopause and maybe prevent and also heal breast cancer, tell me a little bit about your story and how you were diagnosed with breast cancer.
Absolutely. Sure. So when I actually found a lump myself, and when I turned 40, I had started doing mammograms as per the recommendation. They didn't detect anything on my first mammogram. About 10 months later, I was walking my dog in the morning walk, and I just happened to kind of clutch my chest area and I felt something. I immediately asked my partner at the time to see if he noticed something, which he did. And lucky for me, I was able to get through the diagnostic process within a week. And it was very overwhelming. So I completely understand what you're going through right now. And so my breast cancer was a hormonally driven cancer, so fed by estrogen and progesterone. And I was lucky because they detected it early. Now, they originally thought there were two lumps and actually two different types of breast cancer when they went in and did the surgery. So I don't know if you've had your surgery
I've had
already,
surgery.
correct?
Yeah, I had
Yes.
a similar
Okay.
story to you. I mean, basically, I was diagnosed and then I was able to have my biopsy the next day because somebody chickened out of
Mm-hmm.
their biopsy. And then I think I had surgery like a week later.
Uh-huh.
So I went through it's like a funnel that they put you through. And it's sort of, if you're listening and I guess the first big thing we have to say is early diagnosis is where it's at. It is so
Absolutely.
incredibly treatable and it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. So I'm glad that you were diagnosed early, but I was same thing. I got through it in less than a month from the time of diagnosis to my surgery.
Wow. Well, my story actually is a slightly different in the sense I was diagnosed quickly and then I waited for months for my surgery, that was difficult because they thought it was a lot more advanced and far along. It wasn't in my lymph nodes. Well, I didn't know that until after the surgery. So there were a lot of unknowns, which I find can be one of the most difficult parts of cancer for a lot of people is just the waiting and the questions because the mind starts getting really active. Once I had my surgery, which I did opt for a mastectomy, so that I could get out of radiation. Then, things really kind of, I would say, mellowed out pretty quickly with breast cancer too. Like you said, there have been so many advances in the science and the testing. So I was actually able to avoid chemotherapy because they were able to analyze the tissue sample from the mastectomy and recognize that with my specific cancer, chemotherapy would be more harmful than productive. So, I had a surgery. I did lose a breast, which is an experience in itself, but I was able to avoid chemo and radiation. And I'm about to hit my 3-year anniversary of being free of, or I guess they call it no evidence of disease. Ned.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I'm so glad. And again, if you're listening, I think I just hear too many stories of women who are so scared that they're not getting early diagnosis. So I'm a big advocate of getting a mammogram. It's quick, simple, and easy. And if you have dense breasts as I do, you should get also an ultrasound as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the role that trauma plays in cancer, because I know you've been studying this a lot, and I know my own background. I have some trauma in my background that I feel has played a role. What is your information about the connection between trauma and cancer?
Yeah, I really went down a bit of a rabbit hole. I was one of those people when I was diagnosed, similar to you. It was very shocking. I felt like I had been doing a lot of things right. But so what I've found, and this is all somewhat esoteric. There's a field called Psychoneuro Immunology, which I find extremely fascinating. You may have heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, or When the Body Says No, where they really look at that stress disease connection. So I had an extremely traumatic breakup with on my wedding day, a couple of years before my diagnosis. And I really had never felt heartbreak on that level. I've always been kind of a solid person. And it took me down. I mean, I had to really kind of rebuild my heart from the ground up. And, I have some childhood trauma, some sexual abuse. Now, in my research and what I found, they look at more like emotional abuse, but I have noticed in a lot of the literature that I've read, and this is not necessarily backed by science per se, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of women who have had something really traumatic happen emotionally and sometimes around a relationship within like 3 to 5 years before their diagnosis. So I think almost any one of us on this call or in the show today would probably agree stress affects the body, makes you more susceptible to disease. I don't know if I could prove that, but I think it's very interesting to explore stuff like forgiveness, resentment, denial. These are all things that, as I'm studying these emotional roots that come up a lot with just about any cancer, breast cancer specifically, it's, are you somebody, there's the cancer personality or the breast cancer personality. Are you somebody who never puts yourself above others? Do you nourish yourself? How do you nourish yourself, body, mind, and spirit? So it's really opened up this window for me to examine my life in that way.
That's great. No, the body definitely keeps score. So, there's also
Yes.
Damasio talks about emotions are felt experiences in the body. And by really detecting where in the body we're feeling them, we can actually help to, if you feel it, you heal it, healing those places in your body. And mine's on the left. So it's kind of like, I was reading Louise Hay, and it's about, are you receiving
Love
enough?
Louise
And I
Hay.
know that in my marriage and with my kids, I was always like, giving, and just wanting everybody to be happy and trying to make them happy, not thinking about myself. So I definitely feel like there's a connection. So what is the relationship? You also, we had talked on through emails about endocrine disruptors and how can hormone imbalance contribute to that?
So in our world today, and you don't have a hormonally driven cancer, but I guess so that's sort of where I focus on. But I mean, we are exposed to these endocrine disruptors all the time in the receipt paper. When you go to the grocery store, Target, the ink, that's, that has BPA in plastic, all the plastic that we use, the Starbucks lid that you're drinking a hot beverage through. These are all things that are leaching these endocrine disrupting chemicals, and those can mimic different hormones in the body and cause hormonal imbalance. So with a hormonally driven cancer, for instance, like my breast cancer, estrogen dominance, where your ratio between estrogen and progesterone is out of balance, which is very common in midlife, especially because your hormone levels are declining, especially that progesterone. And then when that gets out of balance, you can feed the cancer with those hormones. And so I think it's really important, this non-toxic living. We are seeing a lot more products that are conscious of eliminating some of these chemicals, because if you start going down that rabbit hole, it can be very overwhelming, but it can also be quite frightening to see how little regulation that there is, and how these common household cleaning products, beauty products, what we're putting on our skin, what we're absorbing on an everyday basis. I mean, those are things we can control and get products that are better for us, but we're exposed to things all the time in the air, in the environment that we're in. So I use almost all non-toxic products. And there's apps. I don't know if you've heard like of the EWG Environmental Working Group app, Think Dirty. You can take that to the supermarket and scan items, that your beauty products and stuff, and it'll tell you if it's got stuff in it that you want to avoid. So I do think that's why we're seeing a lot more cancer, especially in, places like California, Marin County, the Bay Area. There is in Ventura County, extremely high levels of breast cancer. And I would attribute that, or I would assume that we're seeing a lot more of this because of the amount of exposures that we're having that are disrupting the balance of the body.
Yeah, it's hard to get away from. I'm working with a physician now, and she's like, no plastics. And so I'm like, okay,
Exactly.
got the water bottle covered, but just even getting products, like getting a box of lettuce or getting, everything. If you go to Costco, I'm buying all organic, but everything comes in plastic bags. So it really is kind of crazy. As I'm sort of using things up, I'm replacing everything, all my household cleaners. I don't wear that much makeup, hair products, all that stuff replacing. But when you take a look at how much toxic stuff we consume, it's incredible. And when you're buying the non-toxic, it's also better for the environment too. And you are voting with your dollar to have more of those environmentally friendly products. So it's a good move on a lot of levels. So I want to talk a little bit about meditation. How did you discover meditation, and how can it help support women with their healing, whether it is, they're trying to avoid breast cancer, going through breast cancer, menopause? Tell us a little bit about and I'm dying to know what this Unplugged meditation is about.
So Unplug is actually the first drop-in meditation studio in the world. And basically it's a 200-hour training. I mean, anybody can, in theory, teach meditation. I wanted to go through a training so that I could guide people through, because as I started my nutrition practice, I realized how stressed out everybody is specifically women. They're trying to manage everything. And that if we don't have our stress under control, that we just really, it's very difficult to make health changes, and it can feel really overwhelming. So, the way I found meditation was about 10 years ago. I was living in Puerto Rico, and I lived right near this gorgeous coral reef. But I had this anxiety about being in the ocean. So I said, I felt like I'm wasting a lot of beauty. And I found the Headspace app. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's pretty common
Sure.
and popular. And they had a free trial, and they had an anxiety program. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. And I did this program, and I was able to conquer my ocean anxiety. And it just really opened me up to a regular meditation practice. I saw such a big difference in me. And as I've gone through various experiences in my life, I've just seen how important it is to be able to have that pattern interrupt, which is basically that moment of just being able to just detach, even for a nanosecond, from your thoughts, because we can't stop our thoughts. And that's a common misconception about meditation, right? Ultimately you want to go to that place of stillness, but it's not going to last. And that's not even really the point. The point is being able to drift back and forth and to train your mind so that you can stop, because we can't eliminate stress, but we can change our response to it. So I highly encourage women that I work with, and any woman, to adopt a meditation practice, no matter how small. 1 minute, even, 16 seconds. If you take a breath for, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, that feeling your feet on the ground. I love that you said you walk around barefoot, like taking a moment to just take a breath and pause, even if that's all you feel like you have, it will change your life. I truly believe that.
It's true. And that box breathing is great. The Navy SEALs
Yes.
actually use that. And what it does is it powers down your sympathetic nervous system, so the fight and flight, and it powers up your parasympathetic rest and digest. And even 30 seconds of doing some breathing, people think, oh my God, I have to sit down for 20 minutes and get a cushion and get a guru. And you really don't. It's really about just either watching your breath or watching your thoughts. And I have to say that my mindfulness practice with this diagnosis has been a lifesaver, because in my mind, you just have all of this information and all this stuff's going through your head. And because I've been meditating for years, I can turn it off. And what happens is you turn off what's called the default mode network. That is a network that runs down the center of your brain that's constantly scanning your environment for danger and self-definition. And the mindfulness piece really shuts it off. So it's so important to do. Also, shutting down the stress response or calming it down if you're going through menopause. It's super important. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition. So what role do you feel nutrition plays both in supporting the body when you're healing from cancer or you're going through menopause? And what type of diet do you generally recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we all know that eating well is going to help you handle situations better. But specifically for cancer, if you are going through surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation, you need to support your body like with proteins to make sure that you're healing properly, sufficiently fueling your body for recovery. Your body wants to heal, but when you are having these, it's a trauma in itself to have a surgery or radiations, anything like that. So you need to be fueling your body with the nutrients so that it can do what it needs to do. And stress depletes vitamins as well, vitamins and minerals. So just trying to give your body what it needs. Fueling, like I said, for surgery, really want to make sure that you're getting proper amounts of protein. With breast cancer, and in my situation with a hormonally driven breast cancer, I am one of those people that does believe organic is important. The quality of your food. If you have the choice of buying an organic, piece of meat or having to have something terrible like ramen noodles or something, obviously you don't need to you don't have to go organic if you can't afford it. Everybody makes their compensation for their particular situation. But just eating whole foods, prioritizing protein. I am a lower carb person. I do believe in the metabolic approach to cancer. There are so many different thoughts on this. But I think anybody can agree that the plant forward diet, just incorporating as many fruits and vegetables, emphasizing vegetables in particular, is extremely important for cancer. And the same goes for women going through perimenopause and menopause. You want a balanced diet, and balancing your blood sugar is extremely important for hormonal balance, and also healthy fats. That's a big thing that you want. High quality, healthy fats really support the hormonal health. But ultimately, I think it's having proper meals that have a balance to them. You don't have to make it overly complicated unless you want to. I'm the type of person that loves to get as deep as possible into it. But I just think really eating a sufficient amount of food, 2 to 3 meals a day. I mean, there is intermittent fasting can be very beneficial for hormone balance if you don't overdo it. Can also be beneficial to support the chemotherapy process. There's scientific studies that show that it is improving the efficacy of chemo and actually is protective for the body. That's probably another episode entirely. Yeah. But yeah, just making sure you're eating proper food and feeling good, keeping that blood sugar balanced, and focusing on nutrient-dense whole foods.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm whole food, plant-based all the way, and mostly vegan, but I do eat a little bit of animal protein that's organic. And fortunately, my fiance is a big gardener, so we are already starting to get the kale and the collards, and everything is growing crazy. I found a change that my integrative medicine doctor recommended is giving up grains has been huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing a lot, my aches, my pains, my knees, which is interesting because I'm a registered dietitian, and my training was so much of 6-7 servings of whole grains every day. But I think you need a really individualized approach. So if you are struggling, I would say, get some help. There are nutritionists, coaches, all kinds of people out there who can support you. So real quickly before the break, what are your 1 or 2 key ingredients for feeling fantastic at midlife? So what are you finding keeps you joyful? Obviously, you've got a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, a lot of juiciness to your life. What are your secrets?
Well, I just saying no to things that I don't want to do.
That's huge.
You talked a lot about getting out in nature, but also for me in midlife, I've gone a bit of a non-traditional route. I'm not married. I don't have children. And for me, actually leaning into my sexuality has been a big thing for rocking my midlife, feeling beautiful, getting dressed up. I actually feel more sexually confident than I ever have. And it's very empowering, and it's bringing me a lot of joy.
That is awesome. I love that. And that shifts a lot. So thank you, Junie, so much. Stick with us after the break. We're going to take a quick break. If you want to get in touch with me, go to themidlifewhisperer.com. That's themidlifewhisperer.com. When we come back, we are going to be talking all about Asian medicine to utilize for both menopause as well as cancer prevention and treatment. See you on the other side.
You are listening to Rock Your Midlife with Dr. Ellen, the Midlife Whisperer. Have a question for Dr. Ellen or her guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5788. That's 866-472-5788. Now back to the show. Here again is Dr. Ellen, the Midlife Whisperer.
Welcome back to Rock Your Midlife. I am so happy that you are here to join us. And I want to let you know that the show is sponsored by theoptimal.me for the midlifer who wants to feel younger, stay active, independent, and energetic without pain or injury, and feel confident that this phase of life is their best. You can take control of how you age with theoptimal.me. You're never too old to take a smarter approach to aging and give yourself the freedom to make your next chapter your best chapter. And I've been using it, and I just love the way that it's teaching me to use my body in new ways as I age so that I really can make the next 40 years absolutely amazing. So check it out. You can get a free month trial. It's theoptimal.me is their URL. So before the break, we were talking to Junie Boucher, and now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we are going to talk to Sholin. She is an alternative and Chinese medicine expert with over 20 years of experience in alternative and Chinese medicine. She is a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist, and she has founded the Integrative Healing Arts in New York City, where she offers acupuncture, herbal medicine, and energy healing to treat her patients. And she recently completed training in psychedelic assisted therapy with the California Institute of Integral Studies. So we're going to definitely have to talk more about that. And she specializes in women's health, anti-aging, stress, anxiety, immunity, sleep, and fertility. Welcome to Rock Your Midlife.
Thank you so much for having me. All great conversation on the first half, and so many practices that I also make suggestions for my patients. And these are, East Asian medicine, Chinese medicine, Japanese, Korean, all throughout. When you look Asia down, really the difference in the paradigm is about cultivating health and wellness. And I like to really emphasize that going away from ideas about transactional medicine to be transformational medicine, right? Because healing is a transformational process. And so what I usually find is like, what is the difference between, East Asian medicine and Western medicine? And when we start to get into like, where's the research? Where's the proof? Then people are usually looking for transactions, causality. And of course, biological plausibility is really important in research, but then we really need to look at, individually, like treating people individually.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I have to say, when you get diagnosed, you're told boo, 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 and every single breast cancer is looked at the same. And I think for myself, what's been really empowering is really to do both the complementary and the conventional. I think there is room for both of them. But it's so true, because Western medicine is really about, okay, let's literally get a code for it so we know what the insurance company is going to do. And so it's all about like figuring out what's wrong instead of figuring out what led to this. That's what I am doing for the transformational piece. And the wellness piece is like, where the heck did this come from, and what do I need to do individually? So it's going to be great to talk about that. But before we dig in, Cholin, do you have a question for Junie?
Absolutely. Okay, so Junie, there was a lot. I'm like you. I go down the rabbit hole of information, and what I usually tell my patients is to kind of like stop doing that, like and clear the cookies, because then like they keep getting these things showing up. So when you were doing the research, how were you able to discern what was relevant versus all the stuff that comes up, and how, what was the one thing that you said, okay, this is the one thing I need to start at, like that? That's what I would like to know from you.
Well, that is a great question. And, what I tell people as well, because it is kind of controversial, and you typically do hear from your medical professional, don't go to Dr. Google. And I just
be careful, right?
Yeah. Like verify the source, where is the information coming from? And, is there scientific basis for it? For me, I really found a mixture of, well, what resonated with me was the metabolic approach to cancer, which Dr. Ellen was talking about, going grain-free. And they are a lot about the role of insulin in the feeding of cancer. And it just felt right to me. So, because, you can go so many different directions, especially with breast cancer. Some people say very much vegan. Some other places, just this extremely low carb. And I had to just look at what I felt was reputable, but also what resonated with me. And then I was reading just various pieces of a little bit more esoteric wisdom and Chinese medicine sort of philosophy about the emotional roots, and just seeing what felt right, because you can't really go wrong if you address areas in your life where you may need to release resentment or forgive. So I think there's a mixture of common sense reputability and going with your gut.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm
Okay.
resonating with all of that. And also just as I'm looking at treatments, my big question is through the lens of, is this going to support my body or hurt my body? And to what extent? Because my goal, and this is kind of, I guess, weird when you go to conventional medicine, like I want to make it to 100. I'm not letting go of that desire. Like my life is awesome and I want to live another, 4+ decades. So as I'm looking at options, I'm always thinking through that lens of what's the downside of all of this. So I'm curious, Charlene, how do you interpret menopause through the lens of Chinese medicine?
Okay. The lens of Chinese medicine is really broad, right? We've got 8 branches. And of course, mind body, which is the practices of meditation. There's food medicine, there's acupuncture, body work, um, herbal medicine, right? Those are more, and then the practices that people need to cultivate their health. So the mind body would be meditation, even doing something like Tai Chi, Qigong. Those are moving meditation, exercise, which is moving the full body. We also have feng shui, right? The art and science of placement, your environment. There is also cosmology, right? Astrological. In the classics, we look at these cycles, it's very interesting. For women, goes through a 7-year cycle, right? So as we approach post 35, our body already starts to shift, right? May start to have a little gray hairs. And then by the time you reach to 49, that's really considered the time when the menses, like a regular menstrual cycle, will stop. And they say you can't have children. However, in the classics, they also say that the ancients understood, how to use the energies of the universe really to cultivate that wellness and up into live to 100 and still have children, right? And these are practices which is really about being in alignment. So when we look in particular, just kind of like scale back or tone back, menopause, we start to look at different patterns. Many of the patterns that women experience as they get older are magnifications of maybe what was going on when they were younger, right? Because over time, you deplete what's called your jing, which is like your essence, like your deeper essence. So there are different types, we could call patterns, that will show up, right? So if somebody was very, let's say, livery, irritated, a lot of anger, like that kind of stuff, then later on you start to see that when that pattern is magnified, they may have more of the hot flashes, the mood swings. Often I ask, someone with a menstrual, let's say, problems or irregularities, are you homicidal or suicidal, right? So you have like that are like they want to kill someone, and then someone else is like crying all the time or back and forth emotionally. And so that's gonna like give information about their, how they operate, right? Complicated right now is really so many women are on birth control. And I see them, of course, and I see fertility patients too, but I look at like, okay, from the age of 15 till 35, that's 20 years on hormone replacement, right? And as Junie was talking about all these endocrine disruptors, birth control is an endocrine disruptor. That's the category. It suppresses a normal cycle. So that means it's not allowing your body to actually do a cycle. And we're looking at, 15, 20 years. One of the things that happens with the hormonal birth control is depression. So we see women that then are on antidepressants. So what becomes really complicated is there are all of these other things, and then there's this aspect of interference, and then there's the food, the processed foods, the chemical, like all of that around. So
yeah, we also don't know that women at midlife have the highest rate of depression for any group for their age and gender. And we don't know if it's because of the menopausal symptoms that they're not sleeping, the more irritable, what's causing it, if it's the hormone imbalance itself, or it's the fact that their life is being disrupted by the symptoms. So it's, I think, as you're saying, it's very complicated.
It's complicated, but it's kind of the same. So I wouldn't really think of it's either this or that, because they all interact. So if you have poor sleep, that means your circadian rhythm is off, and that is what they can call your clock cells are being interrupted. That's very close to the reproductive hormones, like your sleep cycle. So those are like places to look at. And for me, and this is classical, Chinese medicine, is how yin and yang balance. What's in balance, what's out of balance. And so you just like look at the sleep. That's one aspect. Like, when are you sleeping? What's the quality of the sleep? Because we know when that gets regulated, we're also regulating the nervous system, right? And so those are areas. And then, of course, the food. The one thing about, there's so many diets telling us what to eat. And realistically, the one thing that I can say, no matter what kind of body type you are, if it's blood type or if you're doing fasting, sugar. You got to get rid of the sugar, artificial sweeteners, like those are terrible. And so there's so much when someone comes in that you're like, oh, they could, do all of these things, but really give them one thing that they are going to need to focus on. And I'm like, get rid of the sugar. I'm also like, I stopped having dairy, even in my coffee. And I noticed a huge difference in skin, a lot. So you don't even realize that there are foods that are creating microinflammations and then affecting the stress on the body. Right.
It's hard too, because, we're taught, again, if we're coming from conventional nutrition, and I've been a dietitian for 30 years, and, it's not a secret that the USDA makes the recommendations that based on agriculture, not based on health, and I've cut out dairy, I've cut out grains, and certainly no sugar. I noticed a huge difference. So that's hard too, though, because so many people, for people who are emotionally attached to sugar, what you recommend. So I'm sure there's a lot of people listening going, yeah, I've heard it, but I just so emotionally.
Well, everything converts to sugar, right? Everything eventually has to get broken down. I mean, you can definitely have fruit and things. It's just really like the more processed a product is, you're going to find the sugar in it, because that's what gives it the taste. So the thing, and also artificial sweeteners too, because they mess around with insulin, right? Your brain doesn't really know the difference of it. So those are things that, in terms of recommendation. Now, getting back to food, interestingly, the older the culture is, like right now we have food abundance. We can have any food, anytime, whether it's in season or not. Really, to be in yin and yang balance, you want to eat with the season, right? Because that's when the food is going to be the most nutrient dense, right? So we want nutrient, but also in season, right? So we're not artificially getting something. So you could eat fruit all year, right? But there are going to be certain times of the year where it's going to have much more nutrient density, right? But looking culturally, certain foods and cuisine, because food needed to be nutritious. You needed to feed the microbiome in the gut, right? And I definitely tell everyone, you got to do a probiotic, because no matter what, you most likely, it's out of balance. So looking at, especially like, let's say in Chinese cuisine, and this is really like food is medicine. You have like medicinal food, like certain soups and stuff, but also most dishes are made with ginger and garlic, right? So ginger actually helps to warm the stomach. And then the garlic is actually great against things like parasites. So you start to look at and other kind of, viruses. So you look at combinations. In herbal medicine, very classic, you see ginger, right? Again, to allow the stomach to warm and absorb. And then you also see things like licorice, because it coats the digestive tract to make sure that it doesn't irritate, as it's being, and to maximize absorption. And I think one of the problems with, I'm going to say in the West, but also now in the East, is that we've kind of forgotten that certain foods, the way that they were put together, made a difference. It had to be, with the resources that people had, they had to maximize and also make sure always that they were promoting their health and wellness, right? They didn't have cakes and cookies and sugar all the time, right? Maybe they had honey. That was like the big, and honey is actually very medicinal, right? So most foods were really for medicinal was everything so that it made you well, right?
So what are you finding you're seeing are the most common menopausal symptoms, and in terms of treatment, people listening, even if they didn't want to come in and see somebody who was an Asian medical doctor or an acupuncturist, what do you recommend for
So
treating
what do
this?
I see? People mostly coming in. Well, I see definitely weight gain. That's a big, a lot of digestive problems. I see sleep problems. Most women are coming in because they are experiencing terrible stress, and definitely the flashing, the mood swings, um, and really weight gain, and there's like the skin sagging. So I have to say a lot of women come in because of there's this, all of a sudden they're like aging, and everything is starting to, for them to feel like, oh my God, I'm getting so old, once that happens. And so that's the urgency to come in. So really looking at the diet, like what can they do, right? Definitely, I love the breathing exercises because so many people have the monkey mind, right? That they can't meditate. I mean, I learned transcendental meditation when I was 11, right? That just happened like, uh, but not everybody does that practice, nor do they teach their children how to do it. Like, how do you self-soothe? And much of what you say is also women, they don't put themselves first, right? And I hear it like, well, I don't really have time to do that. And you're like, listen, this is your life. Like, you have to feel that you're worth it, right? And I think that comes down again, kind of getting back to that transactional thing. Like, how much will something cost? How many sessions? What do I need to do? Will I get the result? And also not, you know, being connected. And really, that is that alignment, right? The one thing with acupuncture changes the chemistry in the brain. It releases different neuropeptides. It actually remodels the brain, right? There's research that shows remodels the brain. And so this is really, we're looking at not only reframing, how we look at aging, but also recognizing we need to shift, because we need to shift the mind and the body, the spirit, like all of it, right?
Right. And we need to shift the approach too, because as you're saying, people
Yeah.
come in and they're like, just give me hormone replacement therapy, like just give me a pill, give me something instantaneous. And that's not what bringing things in balance are, because when you do those extreme, you throw a hand grenade at something, you're going to create imbalance somewhere else, versus something like meditation, eating a more whole foods, plant-based, diet, making sure you're getting enough rest, saying no, doing all of those things is so much more complicated than just like, give me a pill.
Yeah, and that's actually, one of the challenges is that we've kind of been hypnotized into believing that there's a magic pill, right? And people often take they take the easy route, but in the long run, it doesn't. It ends up being a problem, right? So, of course, once someone realizes, oh my God, or they find out, oh, I have cancer, I need to change everything. Well, that in and of itself, changing everything is very stressful. And really, like, being intentional, and you want to look at the long game. Like you said, you want to be 100, right? So you have to look at this is incrementally, you're making improvements, and that is going to then multiply in terms of benefit, right? So this is really like a practice of health, like a health practice.
I
So
love that you're
that's
saying it as a practice. It's something you do every day. Like I do yoga,
every day.
meditation, even
Yeah,
every
you
day,
get
but
better every day.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to do it too from a place of self-love. You know, I started out my career and it was all about this sort of self-loathing. The doctor would say, you've got to see the nutritionist because you've been bad and you've gained weight, your cholesterol's high, your blood sugar, and nobody wanted to be there. And for me, it's taken me sort of not quite 30 years, but it's been a process with working with people of just doing this because you love yourself, like eating right as self-care, nutritional self-care movement, because it's feeling good. Just so I saw you ballroom dancing, you know, that's something you do on the side, and that's just
It's great for
lovely.
your brain and it's great for memory. But also what I wanted to say, like there's this in our culture is very negative to women. There's always something wrong with them. They're too fat, they're too thin, they're too old, they're too, so there's always this feeling of that we've got something wrong. And where you're saying like kind of like the dislike of ourselves. And really you have to love yourself. And you do it because you love yourself, right?
Yeah, and in your body, even like in my case, you know, I feel like I've got, you know, very small minority of my cells has gone south and everything else is working fantastic. I feel great. And so to know that if you are breathing, there is more going right than wrong, and to look at what's going right and how you can fuel yourself. So awesome information. So we only have a few minutes. I want to make sure Junie has a chance to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So, did you have a question for Cholin?
Absolutely. I could ask you a million questions. But
Well,
I was curious to know, I know you said you have a lot of background with different types of energy work. So if a breast cancer patient came in, what do you find is a beneficial energy work? I mean, I know that's a broad question. I just would love to touch on that area of your expertise.
Well, I mean, definitely something like Reiki. I also like the theta healing, because and you know this is and self, you know, things like self hypnosis to really like talking, you know, body talk. It's really a process. Like when I work with someone, so acupuncture is energy heal because we are moving the chi. And then I also wanted, I know before we were even recording, you were asking me a question about emotion and things like cancer. And one of the things for sure, anger and resentment, but also if someone was abused, then they were invaded by someone else's energy. And if that doesn't get cleared, then that also creates like this disruption that is suppressed, right, and needs to come out. So I just wanted to like answer that question for you that you had earlier done. So the energy, yes, and I think the breathing is the beautiful thing because you know, after several rounds that you realize that as you're breathing, every one of your cells is breathing at the same time, right? So you're really energetic, like you're connected, and then you connect to everything else. You can really feel it, and then you use that energy, the energy of the universe, right, to do the
and
transformation.
I just have to double down on the Reiki because I've been doing Reiki for almost 30 years. I'm a Reiki master. I teach Reiki, and I have to say Reiki has made a huge difference. I didn't need pain management after my surgery. I felt like I just
Wow.
did this and just put my hand on my heart. And Reiki is powerful. I think both. It is something that people can learn. So women, thank you so much. It has been such a joy. Junie, how can people get
Thank
in touch with you?
you.
Thank
You can
you.
contact me on Instagram, Junie Be Well. That's probably the best way right now, or my website, juniebewell.com.
And Cholin, how can people reach you?
They can reach me also on Instagram. It's Integrative Healing Arts NYC. And then I also have my website,
All right.
integrativehealingarts.com.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This is Rock Your Midlife. Reach out. I'm at themidlifewhisperer.com. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.